This is Weights and Wealth, your one-stop shop for entertaining education on building a stronger body and bank account.
We are not doctors or financial advisors and must warn you this is not medical or investing advice. It is for your entertainment.
Welcome back to Weights and Wealth.
This week's shout out actually goes out to me for saying some nice things about Weights and Wealth on Apple Podcast. I wrote, "These guys have such an entertaining and informative podcast. They have improved exponentially from the beginning, and I'm excited to see where they go." Do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. We may have been short a shout out or two preparing for this large chunk of 16 episodes. So Nick had to improvise one.
Just trying to boost the algorithm a little bit. But if you want to shout out, please leave a review or something like that. Share us.
Or share it, yeah, something. You got the wealth wisdom for us, Nick?
I do. So we definitely recommend having a budget. But if you don't want to make a budget or you're just somebody that's not good at keeping one, at least know your savings rate. I kind of relate it to like intuitive eating. From a health perspective, like when I eat, I know roughly how much protein I'm going for, and that's kind of what I shoot for. And the other things, since I'm eating whole foods, all kind of fall in line. Like I'm not a big spender, and I'm putting money away for retirement and into my savings account. So I'm like safe.
Yeah, it's a good comparison too with like the protein for intuitive eating. Mm-hmm. All right, should we get into the intro article?
We shall.
All right, so basically, there's a article from Blue Cross, Blue Shield, or Anthem Healthcare in Kentucky. This came out at the end of 2021, but I just came across it the other day, and basically it confirmed what we knew the whole time during COVID, where basically practices were being paid based off how many of their patients were getting the COVID shot, right? So there were like two deadlines for bonuses. One of them was in September of that year, and one of them was in December of that year. And if you had 30% of your practice vaccinated, you could get $100 bonus per member of the practice. And then it goes all the way up to if you got 75% of the members in your practice vaccinated, the patients, then you'd get $250 bonus per person. So this is obviously a huge incentive for physicians to vaccinate their patient with an experimental vaccine. 2021, that was the vaccine came out in 2021. So you're talking about something that's got almost no data, no long-term data on it. And these insurance companies are paying doctors to give it to their patients. I feel like that's very ethically wrong.
Yeah. Especially since like the government was the one doing it, not I guess they do have medical degrees, but I still think that's coming across the line.
Yeah, I mean, that was like when we found out at the beginning of the pandemic that a bunch of deaths were getting labeled incorrectly because hospitals were getting paid from the government if they had someone that died from COVID. So there was like all the stories of someone died in a motorcycle accident and they tested positive for COVID. So therefore they were a COVID death. So.
Yeah. Same thing with like the number of cases, right? I think they got money just for having a COVID case. So.
Yeah. So a lot of inflation of data. And then also, I don't know. I personally don't want my doctors getting paid to give me a medication.
Or a diagnosis or anything like that, because that's how you misdiagnose people. And there's this company / guy that I follow called the Van Man Company, and it's a very like all natural. I wouldn't even call it a supplement, just products in general, like toothpaste, shampoo, He's big on beef tallow. Do you use beef tallow or? Mm-mm. But people use it instead of like hand cream because it doesn't have all the chemicals in it. It's just
back
like
in the day they used to make soap and different kinds of like lotions and stuff like that out of beef tallow.
Yeah, and it supposedly works a lot better and it's much better for you. But he doesn't have a medical degree, and he just posted something this morning actually, and he said, "Love when people ask me my medical degree. I actually got a master's in accounting and was able to follow the money behind the medical degree, indentured servitude." So I think he's kind of pointing at that healthcare is really just a business and a way to make money. It's not really a way to serve the American population and try to keep them healthy.
Yeah, the insurance companies control really everything. Like we've talked before about how you should probably be getting blood work to see at least where your hormones and some markers of health are. But a lot of doctors won't run basic labs like that are pretty inexpensive just because the insurance company won't pay for it, right? Mm-hmm. So insurance companies do wind up dictating, I think, a lot of medical decisions in this country, which is not optimal.
Right. And with like covering certain types of drugs, like sometimes they only cover the brand name drug, I think, which we'll be talking about this in a future episode.
Yeah.
But that kind of inflates the price that we pay for pharmaceuticals because they have to pay for the more expensive one rather than the generic brand.
Yeah. I guess the old adage of if you want to be healthy, stay out of the hospitals is more and more true, it seems.
Same with taking what the FDA says and doing the opposite of it.
Eat meat and get sunshine.
Yep. Was there anything else?
No, I'm good to move on to our topic for the day. You good?
Okay, yeah.
All right. Our topic for today is all about being proactive and not reactive. And we'll split this up, of course, into the wealth part and the weights part. Nick, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So I kind of, to kind of explain being proactive versus reactive, Ted came up with Paul and Ron. So we have a bunch of different scenarios, and then Paul is smart with his money and lifestyle, and Ron is not.
Got proactive Paul and reactive Ron.
Oh, okay.
It's like a children's book.
So the first one is paying yourself first, which we've talked about this a lot, but Paul has allotments set up with constant investing, and he invests 10% a year. Ron, on the other hand, just transfers money from his checking to his savings every once in a while and ends up averaging about 5% a year. On spending, Paul, he has a credit card, but he pays it off every month, whereas Ron likes to carry a balance on his Visa and he pays $100 in interest a month. And then on education, Paul is constantly improving himself. He's always learning more. He's getting some certifications, stuff that will benefit him in his career, but also just personally. And Ron isn't doing any of that. He's fine with just getting his 3% raise every year. And Ted added to this that it's time for me to become a financial advisor and real estate agent, which I do definitely want to get my real estate agent license because I want to get into owning rental properties. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of route I want to go. I don't know if I would get into flips or anything like that, but just building like that long-term wealth. And then we also talked about me getting the CFA. It's basically like the CPA of finance, and the test is supposed to be harder and takes more time than the CPA. So it takes your average person like 3 years to pass. Wow. I think I can do it quicker because I think they're assuming that you're working investment banker hours and I'm not. Mm-hmm. And plus I have the accounting down from the CPA. So that the accounting part shouldn't be too tough for me. But that's something I've been thinking about getting. Also the financial model valuation something. It's not a well-recognized certificate, but it's something that's really interesting to me.
Yeah. I think something we haven't talked too much about on the show is like a way of investing further in your education, right? So no matter what field you're in, I feel like you can kind of invest in your education. I guess maybe not every field, but in a lot of fields, if you focus on taking some of your extra money, especially very early in your career, and using that to upgrade yourself so that you can make more money, that's a very good way for a lot of people to invest. Because if you're not making a ton of money, you can put away $100 a month, but it might not feel like you're doing a lot, even if over time the compounding interest will help a lot. It can be worth a little bit more to instead invest further in your education, climb to like above your peers with better education than them, and then rise to the top of your field.
Yeah, I mean, I know you told me you spent at least a few $1,000s just in continuing education.
Yeah, I mean, I spend several $1,000s a year on more nutrition and programming and biomechanics courses for personal training. So a lot of people would hear that and they would think that's crazy. But I think those classes are really good. They're really valuable. They help me become a much better coach. And it's like the Dunning-Kruger effect we've talked about before. Like every time I take a class, I realize there's more things I don't know, so.
Yeah.
To me, I want to be the best coach I can. So I'm going to keep trying to learn, always have that white belt mentality. So.
Yeah. And you won't even see a lot of these like financial gains for a while in the future. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of a hang up for people. Like, the CFA, that doesn't apply to it's finance, so it's similar, but I won't use that for my current job. But you never know, it could open up a door in like 10 years or something like that for me to get a better role.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the other thing is like the delayed gratification aspect that you were just talking about. A lot of people, they have their 9 to 5 and they're so like depressed from their job that they can't fathom doing more work like at night. But especially if you're learning about something that you enjoy, I don't think it's that hard. Like it's really not hard for me to go to these classes I'm taking at night or on the weekends and take the class and go through the textbook and take notes. Like I really enjoy the things that I'm learning about, so it makes it really easy.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of key too, because we both love our jobs. Well, your personal,
not my current job,
your personal training, and I do like doing taxes. A lot of people think that's odd, but I like doing them. But that's important, is to pick something that you're interested in and just keep learning more about it. Like the CFA, I like the topics. It's supposed to be about 900 hours of studying for it. So there will be points I know that I don't like if I do end up going through with it. But because it's just a lot of time.
I mean, like, think about how many of your classes in college you hated. Like a lot of people will go to college and then they'll just think that they're done learning. It's like, if that's all you ever do to progress in your career field, aside from like the experience you gain on the job, you're probably not setting yourself up for success compared to some of your peers that have that dog in them and want to be promoted and are willing to do these extra things like outside of work. So
yeah, and I think like a lot of people in college kind of get like the entrepreneur bug, and like that's great, but like your first year of working for a company, I think you learn so much more about just business in general than you did in your 4 years of college. So that's why I think it's also good to work for a good company.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've said this many times on the show, but like if you're a personal trainer or if you're looking to get coached by someone online, you really have to make sure that they've worked inside of a gym before, because the experience that you gain as a personal trainer working inside of a gym one-on-one with people in person is so valuable and makes you such a better coach. I would never trust just like an online coach that doesn't work with people in person. So, definitely like the amount that you learn on the job in your first year is a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think we can continue with our Paul and Ron.
All right.
So Paul also meal preps and spends $5,200 a year on food, whereas Ron buys all his meals and spends $10,400 a year on food. Significant difference.
Double. Did you do that math, or are those made up numbers?
I did a rough estimate, $100 a week versus $200 a week.
Okay.
So, I mean, that might be a little low, or depending on who it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, I mean, at least when I eat out, it's not that big of a difference because I'm buying grass-fed beef and stuff like that. So I'm spending on a lunch probably $10 or so. Whereas if I eat it out, it's like 15.
Yeah. I don't know. For me, like if I'm eating out, if I'm going to try to get the protein that I would get from like a meal that I made, it winds up being so expensive.
That's true.
Also, I house like a pound of meat at once, so it winds up being like 100 grams of protein. That's hard to get out at like a restaurant or something. But
yeah, because for the ground beef, a pound I pay roughly $8 or $9 for, plus the veggies I put in and all that. So, okay, so those are Paul and Ron's stats. And then I built out a little scenario. Just got to pull it up real quick.
Nick sent me, after I made most of the outline for this one, Nick sent me this like Excel spreadsheet of their like these theoretical savings and spending amounts, and it's got like over time how much money they wind up with.
Yeah, and I'll put this on our website once I haven't been keeping up with the website too much, but I plan on revamping it.
We'll also have this in the video if you're watching the video on YouTube or on Spotify.
Yeah. So the basic scenario is that Proactive Paul starts out at $50,000 a year. Ron, on the other hand, starts out at $100,000 a year. But like we said earlier, Paul is much better at investing, does 10%, Ron does 5%. Savings rate, they're both saving 3%. And the salary increase, Paul gets 6% a year because he's constantly improving himself, and Reactive Ron is only getting 3%. And they have the same stock market return, I assume 7%. And then the savings rate, Proactive Paul gets 3% because he's in a high yield savings account, whereas Reactive Ron is just throwing his money. He doesn't really care where it goes, and he's getting 1.5%. So the kicker for me on this is that Ron's salary is double starting out. So he's investing more in the beginning, essentially just because he's making so much more money.
So he gave Ron a huge advantage and made his salary twice as much as Paul's?
Yes. And do you want to guess when Paul's net worth passes Ron's?
12 years.
21.
21.
So It's a little longer, but coming from, making half of what somebody's making to start, that's pretty impressive. His salary has not passed yet at year 21. Ron's at 180 and Paul's at 160.
Okay.
But that's when his net worth passes Ron's. And then in year 40, do some quick math. Do you want to guess how much more Paul has in the bank than Ron?
Triple.
No, not quite. About 950-ish thousand.
Okay.
Which is pretty significant. Now, if we were to start them both at 100,000, this would be like
not even close.
Yeah. way off.
Yeah, we're just trying to make it as close as possible. We have to double Ron's amount. All right, let's readjust the cameras. All right, so now on the weight side of things, we'll kind of continue one of Nick's scenarios here with the meal prepping and the meals. So Proactive Paul meal preps, and even when he doesn't meal prep, he just packs a lunch of things in his pantry that are already made for him. So whether that's sardines and a cheese stick and a juice box, that's still better than going out to eat probably for his protein ratio and keeping the excess calories down.
Or maybe some Lunchables.
Some homemade Lunchables.
Yeah.
The good old wrapping deli meat and cheese into the rolls.
Yeah.
So When Paul packs his lunch, he has a better protein ratio and more micronutrients, whereas Reactive Ron just shows up to work and figures out lunch when he's there at the food court. And he winds up with less protein in his meals and more calories. We went over in one of the last episodes we recorded how the study that analyzed a bunch of different calorie content of restaurants found that on average they were 18% over on calories compared to what the menu said, and somewhere as high as like 200%. So when you are eating out, you oftentimes get a lot more calories than you think. And then also a lot of times you're going to be having seed oils in your food. And if you're trying to avoid those, you're going to probably have a hard time when you're eating out, especially anything fried is going to be made with seed oils.
Do you know much about seed oils? Because I've heard from many different people that they're bad, but I don't really know why.
Yeah, so a couple things about seed oils real quick. We can do another episode where we go more in depth, but just right off the bat, their omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is a lot higher. So you can think of omega-3 as anti-inflammatory and omega-6 as pro-inflammatory. So they're the fat content is a lot more inflammatory. And then also one of the bigger issues is that the fats are oxidized in seed oils compared to other fats. And when you have oxidized fatty acids, it winds up creating a lot of problems metabolically for your body. That's why like when you buy olive oil, it'll be in like the dark bottle usually. Because if there's a bunch of light coming in on a clear bottle, it will start oxidizing that oil, which you don't want.
Okay.
And then also just the way that seed oils are created with all the different chemicals to make them odorless and like colorless. There's a lot that goes into that to create that.
I saw something, I don't know if it's true or not, that they were originally created to be used in engines.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not
it's
for
like
human
it's a waste
consumption.
product basically. And then we had so much of like excess of it, people started to realize they could dye it and change the smell of it and use it for like frying foods and so. All right, moving on to programming. Proactive Paul shows up to the gym with a plan and he stays on his program that he had before he showed up to the gym. This helps him get gains over time by progressively overloading and continuing to increase certain stimuli, increasing stimuli over time, and not just having random different stimuli different times that he's at the gym.
Stimuli?
I don't know.
Would be stimuluses.
We'll skip over it.
Okay.
Reactive Ron just shows up to the gym and does random workouts, just kind of does whatever exercises he feels like. And this makes it really hard for him to progressively overload either in like load or with tempo or with volume over time. So definitely you want to make sure that you're showing up and staying on a program. If you've never been on a program for like 12 weeks, the difference that it will make in your gains is pretty crazy. A lot of people just think, oh, if I show up to the gym and do something, I'll gain muscle, which just showing up to the gym is good. It's good that you're lifting, but having a program can be a real game changer.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, because we were talking about this, like Orange Theory, stuff like that, just showing up to the gym. I think doing nothing, you're at 0. Orange Theory, just showing up to the gym, that puts you at like 70% or something like that, 70, 80%. And then this will bring you to 95, 100%. Just rough numbers. I don't know if you agree. Feel free to disagree.
Maybe I would put it as like Orange Theory more at like 40%, because if you're doing like all that cardio based workout, if these percents are in terms of like good for your gains, I'd maybe put like Orange Theory at 40, just showing up to the gym and getting a pump at like 60, and then being on a bad program at like 70, and then like a good program at like 80 or 90,
Okay.
Moving on to mobility. Proactive Paul does mobility multiple times a day whenever he has a few minutes, gets on the ground or does some mobility with some bands. And he decides to prioritize mobility so that he doesn't have any joint issues. Whereas Ron just kind of does random workouts and never focuses on mobility, and then over time winds up with little aches and pains in his joints and loses mobility and doesn't have the range of motion that he would like to have for daily life.
Yeah, mobility work is the hardest one for me to work in because it just feels like such a chore. But when I am doing those exercises, I can tell that my form's a lot better, and I also I think I get stronger quicker.
Yeah,
it's hard to say for sure, but I don't have those aches and pains, and especially on squat, like my knees can go so much further, and it just makes my form that much better.
Yeah, it seems like, it's just this silly couple of exercises, I can just skip it, but it really does make a difference.
Yeah, this is also kind of why I like to shorten my workouts, because right now they're like 45 minutes to an hour, which leaves me time to do the mobility work.
Yeah. Yeah, I usually spend like 10 minutes. Like that's kind of like my warm up, you know? Next or last, we've got blood work. So Proactive Paul tells his doctor that he wants a panel done for certain markers and hormones so he can see how his body is doing. And so that he has a baseline moving forward, and then when he doesn't feel good, he can see where his deficiencies are compared to his baseline. On the other hand, Reactive Ron doesn't think that he needs blood work. So he just goes about his life. And then when something in his life does happen and he winds up with deficiencies in some area, he doesn't have his baseline to compare it to. So he doesn't know as much about what to fix.
Yeah, that's being very proactive. I'd say that's probably our best one.
Yeah. Still got to get Nick on the blood work train.
I've been wanting to do it for a while, and I've texted you like 15 times the name of it's Merrick Health, right?
That's the one I use.
That's where you go. Okay, so I'm gonna do it soon, just to get that baseline.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everyone. We will see you in a couple days.
Thanks for joining us today at Weights and Wealth, and don't forget to apply today's lessons to live healthy and wealthy.
If this conversation will contribute to your fitness and financial gains, please share it with a friend or family member and give a 5-star review so more people can lift bigger weights and get bigger bank accounts.